When I was a kid, my grandmother Amalia in Gran Canaria in Spain used to take me to the opera all the time. And I think the story that really stuck with me was Madame Butterfly. I just loved it. And it would come every now and then, and she'd always take me to it. And I just loved the music. I loved the story. And I think the reason, other than wanting to wear a kimono like crazy, was that the story of sacrifice, the story of this idea that this woman just gives everything that she believes in, everything that she has for love and to be accepted by this man. Years later, when I was older and in the West End, I watched Miss Saigon. And again, it's a story of sacrifice, and I was really attracted to. And as we were making Mariposa, I realized that why I was attracted to this story of sacrifice is because sacrifice is quite intimately related to queer experience and to being gay, I think. As a gay person, you often have to sacrifice your identity to be accepted by society. Sometimes you have to sacrifice your family so that you can be who you are. Sometimes you have to sacrifice your gender identity so you can be accepted even within the queer community. So I think Madame Butterfly is a very queer work, and as a choreographer that's interested in queering the ballet or bringing queer voices into the ballet, I thought it was a great narrative to sink your teeth into. I wanted to be a dancer from, I think, age 2. My sister used to do flamenco lessons back home in Spain, and my mother used to take me and I used to watch it, and they used to call me the castanet thief because I would steal all the girls' castanets and put them in my pocket and take them home. And I was actually much better than my sister, but they would never let me do lessons. So it was always there. I guess my sister was the first inspiration. And you know, societal and cultural restraints at the time in Spain, it wasn't right for boys to dance. It was considered effeminate, and it was considered, you know, boys had to play football and girls had to play with Barbie or do ballet. So I was always kind of held back from it. My family didn't particularly approve, but when I was 15, 16, I secretly started taking lessons with the Janowski family in Gran Canaria. I absolutely adored it. I love classical ballet, and I really wanted to become a classical ballet dancer. But as I started training, as I started doing lessons, it was clear that my body maybe wasn't shaped in that way, but also that my mind was maybe more shaped, geared towards the creative side of things rather than the performative side of things. I did want to be a performer, so I secretly auditioned for the Northern School of Contemporary Dance in Leeds, while simultaneously applying for universities in England. Never thought at that age that I would become a dancer or go into dance, or that anyone would even look at me in a dance school, but I was given a chance by the Northern School of Contemporary Dance. And I told my parents, who would not have approved, that I was going to Leeds to do English literature. I figured at that age that, you know, the 2 degrees were 3 years, they'll never find out. They'll just pay for it and never find out. Surprise, surprise, 2 weeks into the dance school, my parents get a letter saying, in case your son gets injured, we will contact you because you're the legal guardian. I was 17 at the time. So my parents called me back and said, exactly how are you going to get injured doing English literature? I tried to make a case for the Nordic sagas being very heavy books and you could get back hernia or something, but of course they found me out. So I did have to leave dance school and I went to university for a year, but I think that year, as much as I love literature, I realized that my real passion was dance and moving and seeing how literature and dance work together and narrative dance. So I was very dramatic, like every other Spanish or Latinx person, and I said, I don't care if you'll disown me, and if you never speak to me again, I'm going to become a dancer. They did call me many things that I will not say to the camera, and, and it was a very dramatic situation. But ultimately, they came through, and I returned to the Northern School of Contemporary Dance, and trained as a contemporary dancer, but really kept up my classical ballet. I kept watching ballet, kept researching ballet history, and my head was always in the classical world, although my body was in the contemporary world. And yeah, and as I developed my training, I discovered a passion for choreography, not in the disciplinary way, but I realized that I wasn't very good at being told what to do, rather than I'd much rather tell people what to do. And my head was always kind of imagining what I would do with that movement rather than trying to adopt that movement into my body. And also storytelling. I think from the age of 3 or 2, I was already writing stories and telling stories and imagining stories. Actually, there was a trend, and certainly at the Northern School, and a trend in the UK, of, especially in contemporary dance, of thinking that narrative dance was a crime, that everything had to be abstract, and that you couldn't have characters, and that you couldn't like tell a story through dance. And that was what I wanted to do. I thought, from the first time I watched the ballet, like, that's the purest way to tell a story. Your body, like there's nothing, you know, there's nothing more pure, more human than the body. So if you tell a story through the body, that's the most honest way of telling anything. So I moved to Madrid for a year, and I trained at the Royal Conservatoire for Dance there, where I did train in ballet. And actually in Spain, narrative dance, like in a lot of other parts of Europe, actually was like prominent. And you know, I got to learn repertoire, and I got to learn about narrative dance makers, and I was really inspired by that. So as a student, I was really engaging with the work of Macmillan, Neumayer, Annabel Lopez Ochoa, David Nixon, choreographers who were not only making narrative ballets, but actually they were making narrative ballets about the darker side of human, the darker side of love, who weren't scared to tell difficult stories, stories that were socially engaged. And I thought, this is what ballet should do, this is what dance should be doing. And that's what I wanted to do myself. So they were the inspiration for the work that I went on to do. Shortly after graduating, I started making work with friends and shorter works that got invited to little festivals around the UK. And I realized that actually I preferred to be on the outside. I in a sense, like when I was a child and I was telling stories through writing or through my toys, I could tell stories through the dancers, and that is what my passion was. Although I left university where I was doing literature, literature has always been my other passion, and something that has always struck me, also within the classical ballet canon and the dance canon in general, is the fact that there's hardly any queer characters, any gay characters, any gay narratives in there. Like, we've been systematically silenced for centuries. You know, in literature there are hardly any, in ballet we hardly see any. So what I was really inspired by, what really motivates me, is to give a voice to us through those works. So I love the idea of adaptation, of queering, of getting a work that's existent, but actually finding what the gay reading of that work could be. And that's how I started, really. So my first work, for instance, which was called Young Man, is a queer adaptation of Roland Petit's Le Jeune Homme à la Mort. Roland Petit, up there with my favorite choreographers, also someone who wasn't scared to go somewhere dark and somewhere sexual and somewhere sensual. So we created this duet. It was performed by 2 women, but they were acting as 2 Spanish machos. I was really interested in the notion of Spanish machismo. And it had a leg of ham, and they had motorbike helmets, and it was very racy. It was quite explosive. But it was just really great to look at Petit's work and try to find ourselves in there, try to find myself as a gay Spanish man. By the time I created Young Man, my parents had kind of come to accept me as a dancer and as a dance maker, and they were kind enough even to give me a ham, a leg of ham that we used as a prop in the show, in Young Man. The ham, who we named Fernando, then became the star of my first triple show, which was called Ham and Passion, and he appeared as a character in all of them. Fernando toured with us for a good 6-7 years. He's even gone abroad. He's been to Germany, he's been to the Dominican Republic, he's been to many places. brilliant performer. In Young Man, he represented an abstract idea of masculinity. In another work, he represented temptation, where he was offered to the Virgin Mary as a thank you for liberating the sexual tension of the characters. In another work, he was Fernando, recently murdered fascist soldier during the Spanish Civil War. Is no longer with us, unfortunately. I think that the ballet world is still quite hesitant to allow queer narratives onto their stages, to allow the voices of trans people, to allow the voices of gay people, to allow non-binary identities to be represented in their narratives and in the stories that we tell. So I get to do that a lot with my own company, but when I'm working for other companies, there's still a little bit of resistance. However, I'm very thankful to people like Paul Vasterling, the artistic director of Nashville Ballet in Tennessee, who's commissioned a couple of my works and is really excited about giving other people, people who are othered, a voice on stage. So recently, right before COVID, I adapted one of Edgar Allan Poe's stories, Mask of the Red Death, and it was an all-male cast. And I was thinking about queer temporality, and I was thinking about the AIDS crisis, and so we created this world where all these lost souls kept continuously dancing this eternal ball. I was also really interested in giving ballet audiences the opportunity to see men dancing intimately with each other, to show intimacy, not necessarily anything sexual, but just for men to hold each other, for men to lift each other, but not in a bravura kind of way, but actually to just hold hands and to just be sweet and soft with each other. It was a really beautiful experience, not just the work, which I'm quite fond of, but the actual process of it, because so many of the dancers said to me, I've never, as a man, been allowed to be held by someone else. I'm always holding female dancers, I'm always lifting, or I've never actually been allowed to be soft and to just relax into another body instead of having to jump and do turns. Many of the dancers said, actually, as gay dancers, we've never been allowed to dance our reality. We've always been asked to be princes who are in love with princesses, or asked to be pirates who want women. And actually, similarly with my thoughts about queer representation in ballet, I also started feeling that there's hardly any young people's work that represents what young people who have diverse gender identities, or who have diverse families, who have gay parents, or who have trans parents, or who might feel or identify as trans. Me as a kid, I never saw anything on stage that told me that I was okay. I was always expected to relate to heteronormative kind of characters and stories. So although a lot of the work I made for adults was quite racy, somehow ended up making work for young people, and I'm really loving it. So recently we created a work called The Bull and the Moon, and it's a story about a little bull that doesn't want to go to the bullfight, that doesn't want to be with the matadors. They feel like a flamenco dancing cow. And the moon appears every night and teaches them how to dance flamenco, and teaches them how to wear shoes and how to use the fan and how to put a hair comb on. And the bull ultimately becomes a cow that is accepted by everyone, admired by everyone.
La puerta de mi bujio, ay, ay, la puerta de mi bujio, la puertecita de mi bujio. Tengo a mi mulata dentro, dueña del corazón mío. Tin, 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 tarata, tin, 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 taca, tin, taca, tan, Ale, ale.
And it was such a beautiful process. We did work with youth charities that had trans children or families that had trans members, really informed the work. It was performed outdoors because it was after COVID, so it was just really great to take this work to parks around the UK. And actually, what was really beautiful was that everyone just felt it was very celebratory and very joyful, but also that children were just really happy that the dancer, Dominic, who's a cisgender male, wore a skirt at the end. Everyone was cheering when he puts on the dress, and everyone was cheering when he puts on the heels. And you know, I feel that was a very different reality when I was a kid. I think people would have laughed or bullied, but actually it's really heartwarming to see that children are growing differently, but also it's reminded me of the importance of this kind of work. When I approached adapting Madame Butterfly, one of the first things that struck me was what a tremendously Orientalist and imperialist work it is. And if you read the work of people like Edward Said, who write about Orientalism and a lot of post-colonial theory, you know, I didn't feel right telling that story as it was. I did not feel I could express the voice of an oppressed and commodified Japanese woman, being myself a Hispanic gay man. So I was doing a lot of research on gender identities in the Dominican Republic through the Dominican Ballet and the National Dominican Ballet School. And whilst I was there, I was really struck by the amount of male sex workers that are on the island. And I was also fortunate to have access to the Black trans community over there and to understand what their situation was like. I also understood, whilst being in Santo Domingo on multiple trips, that there is I don't think it's even silent. There is still a very strong colonial influence there. There is a very strong sense of the West having power over the Caribbean. And actually that translates a lot into bodies and into sex work and into bodies as currency. So whilst I was there, I understood that there's still a lot of narratives about young men or women that will sacrifice anything for someone from the West so that they can escape a country that is in development or a situation that's very different. So being in Dominican Republic, spending so much time there, really having the opportunity to seep into the culture, that's what inspired the narrative to shift from Japan to the Caribbean. And actually also I had to reflect on and be realistic that part of that colonial relationship is with Spain, because Spain, although we try to be very quiet about it, actually we were a very strong colonial force. So I decided to translate it to a reality that was mine, one of a Spanish sailor that goes into the Hispanic Caribbean and has this relationship with someone who is desperate to leave the island, but is also desperate to be loved. Mariposa was a 6-year process in the making, between research and different incantations and different incarnations of it. Along the way, we created a very strong artistic team with composer Luis Miguel Cobo from Spain and French-Indian writer Kartik Aner, who's created the libretto. And I think, like, things are slow cooked, so much emotion and so much richness of meaning has gone into the work that I think actually it's quite a special butterfly, if I say so myself. It has a very diverse cast that's intergenerational, and it's quite moving.